So today and tomorrow we're going to be looking at Krishna meditation. Some of you I see have the book. And this was written with Kamalasita, hometown author. Briefly, this book was also a bestseller on Amazon. What was cool about this book being a bestseller, it was a bestseller in the meditation category and in the Eastern philosophy category. So not for very long because I had a lot of competition. That was very heartening. So today I'm going to be teaching part 3 of the book. Tomorrow part 2. If you have a book, I'll be happy to sign for you later. So Queen Kunti is standing right next to Krishna, and she calls him the personality of the form of the universe. So Srila Rupa Goswami tells us we should always do what?
Remember Krishna.
Always remember Krishna and never forget him. Is that easy? No. And please sit where you can see the presentation. Maybe you can all move over a bit. Yes. Like, see? Yeah, thank you. We have a lot of seats up here too. Sit on the floor. So the reason is that we tend to think about what's absorbing our sensory input during the day. What I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm tasting, what I'm smelling, what I'm touching are the things that I think about. Correct?
Yes.
Right? And so the advanced devotee naturally does the kind of meditation we're going to be looking at. And the neophyte devotee has to do it intentionally as a sadhana, to have everything that we interact with remind us of Krishna. Everything that we deal with be what Srila Rupa Goswami calls an udipana, or an impetus for thinking about Krishna. So as we go through this, I'd like you to take some notes and pick out 1, 2, or 3 of the items that we're going to talk about that you're going to choose to meditate on in the next week. And at the end of the class, I'll ask you what you have chosen. In our book, we have some nice quotes from Srila Prabhupada, our Acharyas, and the Shastra. One of my favorites is where Srila Prabhupada says that if we practice thinking like this, we practice meditating like this, there would be no more material world. And there's one class where he says it 3 times. He says there'll be no material world, there'll be no material world, there'll be no material world. What do you think? Does that sound good?
Yes.
Yes? All right. So again, please take some notes and be picking out 1, 2, or 3 of these that we're talking about, specific things that we're talking about, that you're going to meditate on this week. And again, we're starting with this statement by Queen Kunti, looking right at Krishna and saying, you are the personality of the form of the universe. So the mouth of the Lord is fire. The voice of the Lord is compared to fire. His mouth is the blazing fire. So Sudarshan is called the master of speech, and this fire of speech, it eliminates ignorance, it illuminates, it warms, right? It nourishes. And whenever we are speaking like that, we can understand there is Krishna. His skin is the Vedic hymns. When we are chanting Hare Krishna, or we're chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, or we're chanting any other Vedic hymns, we're actually touching the skin of the Lord. Now the Vedic hymns are also his cerebral passage there, the passage from the head to the spinal cord. And the Vedas are the brain of any religious community like this one. The spiritual knowledge of that tradition. And without the Shastra, our community wouldn't have the guidance to move forward. We wouldn't have the flow of awareness. Just like our body cannot function without the spinal fluid flowing through the cerebral passage. And his words are the Vedic mantras. When we're reading or hearing the Vedic mantras, we're actually hearing the voice of God. He's directly speaking. Whether they're chanted with our voice ostensibly or someone else's voice, it's actually the Lord speaking. Now this is such a fun one, that his tongue is the source of all food. So we receive food through our tongue, but his tongue actually creates food. Everything we're eating is coming from the Lord's tongue. And he wants us to take this food and share it. Krishna really emphasizes this concept of sharing. We spoke about this a little bit in our second class on Saturday in Career Dharma about the principle of charity. So it's explained in the Vedas that how much money we have in this life is a direct result of how charitable we were in our previous lives. There's a lot of evidence that being more charitable now in this life will end up increasing our income by as much as 6 times. The whole universe is actually geared to facilitate and reward sharing. So whatever food we get, we're supposed to share. Now, not just food, but his tongue is also the source of all rasa. Rasa means some sort of taste, some sort of pleasure. It's a very difficult word to translate, as Srila Prabhupada himself wrote in the Nectar Devotion. Sometimes Prabhupada would translate it as humor or mellow, but it's a very difficult word to translate. It's kind of the essential pleasure of something. And in Ayurveda, rasa is also liquid. It's always liquid. If we think about the pleasure of our senses, they're all involved with some kind of liquidity. Our eyes can only see if they're liquid, right? If your eyes get dried out, they just become painful. You can't see properly. Our ears have to have wax. Our nose has to have mucus. Our skin has to have oil. Otherwise, we can't interact with the sense objects, right? Our tongue has to have saliva. So rasa is also this liquidity. But anything we enjoy is coming from Krishna's tongue. I was just this morning hearing Prabhupada talking about Rasova Vaisa, that Krishna is Akila Rasamrita Murti, that Krishna is rasa, and his form is all rasa. Now, there's something really interesting here, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday with the instructions that Krishna was giving to the gopis at Kurukshetra, which is very related to Rath Yatra, because that's where the residents of Vrindavan, especially the gopis, but all the residents of Vrindavan, are trying to bring the Lord back to Vrindavan metaphorically by pulling the Rath Yatra cart. And there the Lord says to the gopis at Kurukshetra during the eclipse, he says, just like all the material elements enter into everything and yet remain separate, in the same way I enter everything and remain separate. Some of you were here yesterday when we were talking about this? And we were noting that this verse in chapter 82 of the 10th canto, the same concept, not exactly the same words, but the same concept is repeated in chapter 47 of the 10th canto. In the letter Krishna writes and sends with Uddhava to the gopis. Just like all the elements enter into everything but remain separate, so I enter into everything and remain separate, which of course is the philosophical concept, Achinta Bheda Tattva. This particular point is also in the 3rd verse of the Chatur Sloki, which are the 4 key verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is essential truth spoken concisely. That which is universally true, eternally true, and trans-contextually true. It's true for everyone at all times and in all places. And Krishna there says the same thing to Lord Brahma. Just as the material elements enter into everything and yet do not, so I enter into everything and yet do not. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has a very interesting commentary on that verse in the Chatur Sloki, which we talked about again yesterday. And he echoes the same thing in the 8th shower of nectar of the Madhurya Kadambini having to do with prema. And there he talks about how the Lord desires that the devotee enjoy him, the Lord, through each of the devotee's senses. Srila Chakravarti Thakur says that the Lord is saying, I want my devotee to taste my beautiful form, my fragrance, my voice, my touch. I mean, in his book, Madhurya Kadambini, in the 8th shower of nectar with the description of prema, it says that the Lord appears before the devotee, and the devotee is drinking in the Lord's beauty with his eyes, and it's so overwhelming that all of his senses become like eyes, and then he faints. And then the Lord revives the devotee with his fragrance, and all of the devotee's senses become like a nose to smell the Lord. And then again the devotee faints. And the Lord speaks with his voice like thunder. And the devotee revives and is relishing the sound of the Lord's voice, and all the devotee's senses become like ears. And then the Lord revives the devotee with his touch. And the devotee again is in ecstasy, and all of his senses become like touch. And finally the Lord's taste. So the point is that the Lord wants us to enjoy him. He wants us to enjoy him. He wants us to feel pleasure at his existence. Really, this is what we want. If you can think about the greatest gift that someone can give us, it's that they feel happiness at our existence. This is one of the main reasons people get a dog. So when they come home, the dog goes and is so excited to see them. So years ago, we had a vegetable garden, and our vegetables were being eaten by slugs. Do you know what slugs are? They're like snails, but without shells. And they're just terrible for gardens. Like, they'll just destroy your garden overnight. We tried so many ways to get rid of them. Finally, we read that ducks like to eat slugs. So we got a couple of ducks. And they're very effective, by the way. They did eat all the slugs. And our garden was slug. We had them, kept them for, I think, 1 season, 1 or 2. And then we gave them to like a teaching farm where they'd be taken care of. But our garden was slug-free for the next 5 years. Anyway, I don't know why they really liked my husband. Like, he didn't give them food or water or anything, but they just fell in love with him. And they could hear his vehicle from 2 blocks away. And as soon as he'd be coming down the road, he'd have to come down the road and turn a corner. As soon as he was coming down the road, they would wag over to the gate. And they'd go, and he'd be so thrilled that the ducks were receiving him with so much attention. So this is why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prays for ecstasy. When will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj says, this is not the devotee wanting to enjoy sense gratification. But Krishna is so happy that when we see him, when we smell him, when we hear him, when we taste him, that we feel ecstatic. Now conversely, the conditioned soul tries to get pleasure separately from Krishna by taking Krishna's energy and enjoying it themselves. So I talked about this yesterday, just like, I'm given a room to stay in upstairs and it's very nice, and Gokulesh Prabhu and the Santi, they're asking me, are you happy? And if I say, yes, I'm very happy, I'm very comfortable, then they're happy. You understand? But if I said, yes, this is a nice office chair, I think I'll take it on the plane with me. So that's not pleasing. If I come and say, oh, let me take this energy and steal it for myself, then that's going to make them unhappy. But if I'm enjoying the facility as part of my being here and part of my relationship, that makes them very happy. Is this clear to everybody? Yes? So Krishna wants us to relish him, but he wants us to relish him directly out of love. And so this is all the Lord's tongue, all the different pleasures that we're having, and if we experience them that way, this is actually Krishna directly. How wonderful Krishna is. Just like we don't say we're eating prasadam, we say we're honoring prasadam. Oh, how tasty the Lord is. How fragrant the Lord is. On his lips is greed. So our lips are often greedy. We talk too much. We eat too much. So Krishna also has greed. What is he greedy for?
Butter.
Butter. What else? He's greedy for love. And he's really greedy. What does he say as Giriraj Govardhan? Anior, give me more, give me more. Huh? It's not that Krishna says, well, Radharani loves me, what do I care about that person over on the earth planet, No. I don't need Esther's love, I got Radharani loving me and the cows. No, he's greedy for love. He wants everyone's love. He wants everyone's devotion, and he also wants your butter. So his smelling powers generate the Ashwini Kumaras and all of the medicinal herbs. So we know what it's like, right? If we're using herbs like peppermint and rosemary, right? The smell of the herbs. So where did the smell of those herbs come from that make us healthy and strong? It's actually Krishna's breath. It's actually Krishna's breath, actually his smelling. And in his nostrils is also the wind. So the wind brings changes in weather. And think about the changes that flow through our life. This is actually the breath coming from the nostrils of the Lord. And our breathing is based on his breathing. So just like there's so many cells in our body, and all of them have their own breathing process. You all know this, right? All the cells in my skin, my heart, my stomach, and everything, they're all breathing. So how are they breathing? Because I breathe, the oxygen that I breathe in is then given to all of my cells. They can breathe because I breathe. In a similar way, Prabhupada says we're all cells of the universal body of Krishna, and it's only because he's breathing that I can breathe. Now the difference is my bodily cells probably don't know that I exist, right? At least I doubt it. I really doubt that the cells in my pancreas know that there's an Urmila. They probably are just focused on their own little lives. And in a similar way, we can forget that there's God. We can forget that we're part of the body of God. But to have that consciousness, I'm breathing because he's breathing. And fragrance is his sense of smell. So all these different fragrances is all his sense of smell. Like my breathing has some smell, but maybe it's not such a nice smell. You know, people are always taking like breath mints and stuff with their smell. All his breathing energies are producing all different kinds of fragrances. These different smells we have, they're all the smell of the Lord's breath. And the air around us is his breath. So in English we have these two words, breath and air. And we distinguish between the air that's inside of a living body, which we call breath, and then the air outside of our body we consider to be just inert gases. But that's actually not a fact. The air outside in this room is the breath of God. It actually contains the prana of the Lord. When we are breathing in, we are breathing his breath and his prana. Such a nice thing that we can meditate at any time, any place. And his eyes are generated. I love the I don't have a copy of the book with me because we sold all of them, but the painting that Nadia Mani did for this is really, really nice. It's absolutely gorgeous. That his eyes generate all forms that glitter and shine. So our eyes are receiving form and his eyes are creating form. You know, I can't do that. I can't look at this table and go, cheesecake. And it just appears there. But I had some cheesecake yesterday. But I don't think it was created by somebody's eyes. But Krishna is actually just looking at the whole creation, and from his looking, all the forms are created. And his eyeballs are the sun and the higher planets. You know, when we have relationship with someone, we make eye contact, correct? And Prabhupada often talks about how the sun and the moon are Krishna's eyes. When we're seeing the sun, the moon, or Jupiter, Venus, etc., we're actually looking in the eyes of God. And we're making eye contact with our very dear friend. Then his eye pits are outer space. So, you know, my eye pits are kind of ghastly, bone. But Krishna's are full of wonder and full of beauty and full of depth. Mm-hmm. And this is something that Srila Prabhupada talks about a lot, how that the sun is Krishna's eyes as the power of seeing. They're just like I can only breathe when Krishna is first breathing. I can only see when Krishna is first seeing. And again, this is something Srila Prabhupada talks about a lot. That first Krishna has to see with the sun, then I can see. That I cannot see without the sun, right? I don't know if you've ever been in a really, really dark place. But when my husband grew up, there were copper mines. And I remember we took a tour of one of these copper mines. And it's so dark that you literally can't see your hand in front of your face. If you've ever been in a mine. You know, there's no light at all. So without the light of the sun, or even our artificial lights are indirectly derived from the sun, from burning fossil fuels or hydroelectric power or directly solar power, even wind power, that's all indirectly coming from the sun. So unless Krishna is seeing, I cannot see. Now his eyelids are day and night. So when his eyes are open, it's daytime, and when his eyes are closed, it is night. So when we're waking up in the morning, Krishna's opening his eyes. When we're going to bed at night, he is closing his eyes. This is one I really like to meditate on. The sunrise and the sunset. I was thinking about this also this morning during sunrise. The sunrise and the sunset are Krishna's clothes moving through the sky. So what color are Krishna's clothes? Well, Krishna's blue, and what color are his clothes?
Yellow.
Yellow, but kind of a saffrony, orangey sort of yellow. And so in the sunrise and sunset, you see this sort of orangey yellow, and then underneath you can see the dark blue of Krishna's form. So on his neck were all the sounds. And I'm sure we've seen birds that make sounds by moving their neck. Yes? Now his ears hear everything, but especially the Vedas. Just like even in a very noisy environment, we can especially hear the sound of our own name. So although Krishna is hearing everything, when we recite the Vedas or we call on him, he becomes especially attentive. His ears generate all sounds. I hear a motor. Sounds like someone in the kitchen. Cars. All those sounds are actually coming from Krishna's ears. Everything we hear is emanating from his ears. They're all sounds within his own body. Now in his steps are the fire of sacrifice, called Havyam Karma Bihi, which means the way that we can take our activities in this world and dedicate them to the Lord. So our job, our family, our taking a shower, our putting on our clothes, everything that we're doing, if we're dedicating that to the Lord, that is actually the Lord stepping through our life as Havyam Karma Bihi. And in his touch is lusty desires. This is something that I keep in mind when I try not to touch people. there's some crowded situation and I'm making sure that I don't touch someone. So I read about this true story that there was a convention of Catholic priests, monks, and nuns, and going through a doorway was a monk and a nun, and she said they didn't even actually touch. She said just their clothes kind of touched, and a month later they got married. So the hairs on his body are the source of all vegetation, especially those required for sacrifice. And all the trees are his hairs. So I like to meditate on this one, just like there's so many plants and trees here, and each one of them is a hair on Krishna's body. You know, there's so many beautiful plants. And you can just look at that. My mother used to really like this poem that says, I think that I will never see a poem lovely as a tree. One of her favorite pieces of poetry. And sometimes I like to look at a plant or a tree and think, how beautiful is this hair? You know, if I could just see one of the hairs of Krishna's eyebrows, then one could meditate on that forever. How incredibly beautiful that is, which we can gain some appreciation of the beauty of the plants, which are all the hairs on his body. This is also such a nice meditation. Just like sometimes we have some insect walking on our arm, yeah? And you can feel it walking on your arm here. And so we're often walking out among trees, correct? Practically every day, if we're walking outside, we're walking among trees. And then you can think about, oh, I'm just like this little insect, you know, walking on the body of Krishna. It's very intimate. It's very close. I'm right there on Krishna's body. And then the clouds are the hairs on his head. So what color is Krishna's hair? It's blackish. Right? So certainly we can meditate on this when the clouds are blackish, but sometimes they're white clouds. When does Krishna's hair look white? Oh, he has a white hair on his chest, but the clouds are the hair on his head. So when does the hair on Krishna's head look whitish?
The dust from the cows.
Excellent! I need some Mahaprasadam in there. Get a piece of Mahaprasadam. Yes, the dust of the cows. When Krishna comes back to Vrindavan in the afternoon, so he's bringing the cows and they stir up dust and it makes his hair look whitish. When else does Krishna's hair look whitish? So that's from the 10th canto. There's another one from the 1st canto. Chapter 9. It's also from dust. On the battlefield, yes. When he's rushing towards Bhishma, he has the big wheel. And Bhishma, when he's leaving his body, says, I meditate on Krishna rushing toward me with the chariot wheel, his hair looking white from the dust of the battlefield. So when we see the white clouds, we can remember Krishna fighting on the battlefield, or we can remember Krishna bringing his cows back from the pasture. And all the drugs and herbs are the hairs. So remember the fragrance of the herbs comes from Krishna's what?
Nose.
His nose. So whenever we're sick and we're taking any kind of drugs or herbs to get better, like even most pharmaceuticals, they're either derived from plants or the essence of plants or the synthesized chemicals of plants. So it's really Krishna's hairs and he's breathed on. And that's the potency of them. So in his nails are electricity. So every time you turn on the light, you turn on your phone, anytime you use electricity, that's the touch of Krishna's nails. He's touched it, zap, with his nails. And also on his nails are the horse, mule, camel, and elephant. So these used to be the main working animals in human society. I don't think you see them much here in Cape Town, right? When I was in Guyana and Suriname, there was horse-drawn carts still working on the roads. Of course, you'll see that in India. If you go to Thailand, you'll see a lot of working elephants. And of course, in northern Africa, you'll see the camels as working animals. So our nails are often used as tools, and so therefore on the Lord's nails are these animals that are doing the work for human society. Then this is a nice one. On his nails are all the stones. So I remember this whenever I see anybody with painted nails. Okay? People paint their nails to look different colors. And sometimes even now they glue little stones on the nails, right? And whenever I see people with nails like that, I just think, Krishna's nails, they're actually rubies. They're actually emeralds. And they're actually diamonds. And it's just painted to look like that. Then all the wild animals are in Krishna's belt. So our belt holds up our clothes, right? So just a few months ago, I was in an airport and they were making an announcement. Someone left their belt at security. So any of you whose pants keep falling down, please come back to security and claim your belt. So the wild animals actually keep the ecosystem in balance. And if you haven't already seen it, there's like a 14, 15-minute video on YouTube about the reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone National Park in the United States. And it's really interesting. They had killed all the wolves there. And then some time ago, they decided to reintroduce one wolf pack. And in this documentary, it shows how this one pack of wolves changed the whole ecosystem. Turned the prairie lands into forests, changed the flow of the rivers, all the flora and the fauna. So actually, these wild animals are the belt of the Lord, keeping everything up and in balance. Then his lotus feet protect us from all kinds of fear. I need to water those flowers. Remember we were talking about that? We had to put it on the list for the night pujari. Water the flowers.
The DC team, they said it's on the list because devotees keep forgetting.
They keep forgetting.
But Chaitanya Bhagavat won't forget.
Okay. And probably you should pull those two. There's a wilted rose in each of them that should be taken up. Actually, this morning, the class I was listening to from Prabhupada this morning, he saw one wilted flower on the altar, and the whole class he gave was about that. So I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. Prabhupada was going on and on and on and on and on about how we have to see the deity as a person. He says, if you don't see the deity as a person, you'll think, oh, I can have some garbage flower here. He said that you would never give to another person. Right? You're buying flowers for your wife or girlfriend or whatever. He's saying that we have to not see the deity as the stone statue, so that we have nice flowers. So his lotus feet give us protection from all kinds of fear. This is something we can remember when we're walking, especially if we're walking on uneven or slippery ground. You'll know how all your attention will go to your feet, right? You won't even see anything around you. You'll just be watching your own feet to make sure that you don't slip. So whenever we're in that kind of a situation, we can remember that it's Krishna's feet that give us the stability and the freedom from all kinds of fear. And the rain is his semen. So ordinarily, a male can produce offspring only of the same species. But Krishna says, Aham bija pradapita. I am the father of everyone. And directly and indirectly through the rain, all the different species exist. And not only that, but his semen is all the waters. So according to Ayurveda, our reproductive fluid is our most concentrated energy source in life. And if we think about the waters, they're kind of the essence of our life, aren't they? that nourish us and refresh us and allow us to function. And this is actually the Lord's concentrated energy. Then we can also remember the Lord when we're on the toilet. The universe also has an evacuating organ that gets rid of envy, misfortune, and hell. And is where death takes place. But you know what's really cool in this universe is that death is always the source of new life. The dying bodies of trees and plants and animals, they act as food for new life. And when one dies, one also gets an opportunity to start over again. We don't remember everything we did, everything we did wrong in our other lifetimes. We get some kind of a fresh start. So just like in our body, we have an evacuation system that gets rid of toxins, anything that's indigestible, right? So in the universe, there's also the system of purification and cleansing. Then in his jaws is Yamaraj. So Arjuna sees this, and he sees the Virat Rupa. He sees all the soldiers entering into the Lord's mouth and being smashed. Hey, Urmila, why don't you kind of sit over there so you can see better? And just being smashed in his teeth. Smash. Right? So sometimes it may appear to us that good people suffer and bad people enjoy, but we know behind everything there is Yamaraj, and all the sinners are getting smashed. Also, something you can remember, if ever someone sent me a news article the other day how such and such criminal was being punished and put in jail for 20 years. And whenever we see that there's justice done, that's the smashing of the Lord's jaws. But affection is his set of teeth. When we feel Krishna looking at us with affection, we feel his grace in our life. We know he's smiling at us and showing his teeth. That immorality is on his back. So once Prabhupada was on a plane and the pilot came, you know, they can put the plane on autopilot and have the co-pilot there. So the pilot came and sat next to Srila Prabhupada for a while and said, I'd like to ask you that if God is all good, why is there evil? And Srila Prabhupada said, evil is on God's backside. So even those who do evil are still on the body of God. They're still part of the body of the Lord. But they're there in such a way that they really can't interact with him very favorably. So the rivers and the riverlets are his veins. So we have our nice little river here, right? What's it called? Lisbeth or something? Lisbeth. The Lisbeth River. It's a very small river.
It's bigger than it gets.
Oh, it gets bigger, okay. Because I saw it and I was thinking, I call this a stream or a creek. I don't know if I really call it a river. Okay, this is a little river. So these are the Lord's veins. Yes? And the rivers of the world, the rivers and the rivulets of the world, they form the borders of countries. They provide for human habitation. They dictate the migration of animal herds. They allow us to move goods from surplus to need. I was thinking just now that I often had this class translated, and whenever I was having it translated, I could never say, it moves goods from surplus to need, because nobody could ever translate that. And I'm like, I can speak in English again, and I don't have to worry about anybody translating this into some other language, and I can just say what I want to say. So the rivers are doing this function, just like the veins in our body are doing the same thing. And when we see these rivers, hear these rivers, we understand that they're the means of life in the world and they're the messengers of the Lord's heartbeat. On his bones are the great mountains. So sometimes when I teach this, I'm in a place where there's no mountains. But here, of course, Cape Town is known by its mountains. All you have to do is just take a picture of the mountains and everybody knows, oh, I know them. And we see these beautiful mountains. These are the bones of the Lord, giving structure, right? Giving form to the world. The main things of carrying the world are the mountains. On the Lord's arms are the great demigods and the other leaders who protect people. If we are protecting others, and we're talking about this with career dharma, of course, if we're protecting others, we see others who protect others. They're situated on the Lord's arms. And there are also the great demigods, the great devas like Indra, and the kshatriyas, the firefighters, the police officers, the social workers, the lawyers, the judges, the politicians. They're actually the arms of the Lord, and they're meant to carry out the will of the Lord for protection and for care of all living entities. Modesty is his upper lip. So one of the 64 qualities of Krishna is that he's shy. This is how atheists can look at the world and not see God. He's kind of like an artist who hasn't signed his painting, right? Because he's shy. And the shyness is in his upper lip, so he's kind of like this. And the desire is in his chin. Think about little children. Sometimes when they want things, they stick out their chin. Again, what does Krishna want? What's his desire? What's his desire? Our love. He wants us to be genuinely happy. That's his desire. Hey, why don't you guys be happy already? On his heart is religion or dharma. So when we are actually following dharma, when we are following our dharma in this world, when we are following our transcendent dharma, then we're right on the heart of the Lord. And there on his chest is truth spoken pleasingly. It's very easy to speak harsh truth, but when we speak pleasing truth, we're actually embraced on the Lord's chest, and there we are, right next to Dharma, and also on his chest, of course, is the goddess of fortune. So when we speak pleasing truth, we are right there at Dharma, and we are right there at Lakshmi Devi on the Lord's chest. So also on his chest are all the stars. So a little bit, Nitai Mayapur Chandra, I think their jewelry is glittering a little bit, huh? Sometimes the Lord wears necklaces. Sometimes the Lord wears necklaces that really glitter like stars. And we also have some descriptions, like in some of the poetry of Jayadeva Goswami. He writes about how the Lord likes to put necklaces on his beloved that also glitters like stars. And so we see the stars in the sky, and we're seeing the glittering necklaces of the Lord. And the ocean is his waist. So this is something you hear in Cape Town. I'm sure most of you go to the ocean regularly. Yeah. So the ocean is his waist. So just like the waist, it brings together the upper and lower portions of the body. So the ocean is joining together various pieces of land. And we know Krishna's always dancing. Yes, and when he's dancing, he has these three folds on either side of his waist, and you can see that when you go to the ocean and you see the movement of the waves and the currents and the ripples. These are the ripples in Krishna's waist as he is dancing. The passing ages are his movements. So of course Krishna says, when we look at this tomorrow, he says that he is time. And how do we measure time? We measure time in movements. We measure time in the movements of the earth, the movements of the sun, the movements of the various planets. And such movements are actually Krishna's movements. And we can feel as time passes, as we get older, that it's actually Krishna moving through our life as time. This next one is something that is understood by all religions, that the source of the material creation is his intelligence. So all religious people generally refer to this as intelligent design. I mean, the amount of intelligence that goes into this creation is unfathomable. I mean, let's take something extremely simple in this room. All right, let's take one of these cushions on the floor. That's extremely simple. But just imagine how much intelligence has to go into the creation of one of these cushions. So someone has to grow the fiber. They have to grow the cotton or the flax. Or if it's synthetic fiber, they have to get it from petroleum. They have to clean the fiber. They have to spin the fiber. They have to dye it. They have to produce the dyes, find the dyes, or produce the dyes. They have to weave it. It looks like these have the pattern woven into it, so it looks like two different colors for the striped ones, and then they're put in. So someone has to design the patterns, has to design on the color, then someone has to sew it together, and then probably inside these is foam, so someone has to make the foam, which is probably made from petroleum. It has to be distilled and refined in a certain way. Right? It's actually quite complicated and requires a tremendous amount of intelligence on so many levels. I mean, a chimpanzee couldn't make one of these cushions. A 2-year-old child couldn't make one. And it's so simple. And if we think about, say, one living cell is more complex than all of Cape Town. How can there not be a God? If we recognize that making one of these cushions, making a curtain, requires intelligence, even though those things are extremely simple. How, with the incredible complexity we find in this world, can we say that there's no God? Lord Brahma and the saintly persons are in his intelligence. Whenever we are hearing from the saintly persons, we are actually connecting the intelligence of the Lord. And the moon is his mind. The moon always appears to be changing. Our minds are very changeable. And we may think that Krishna's mind is changeable. We might think today he likes me, yesterday he didn't like me so much. But although the moon appears to be changing, actually it's constant. So although it appears that Krishna's always changing his mind, actually he's always fixed in his love for us and his care for us. Then Rudra is his ego. Now, this is interesting because Rudra means also anger. And one of the main ways that we can tell that we have a false ego is in our anger. A person can say, oh yes, I don't have any false ego. And then all you have to do is insult them. Or they have to just think maybe you insulted them. Or maybe you just didn't respect them enough. And it doesn't have to be full-blown rage. I mean, even just, our kind of irritation and annoyance, which is sort of mini anger. Right? If ever we think, I haven't been treated fairly or I haven't been treated with respect. Of course, we often say that our anger is not really about that. Our anger is really principled and it's really about some higher purpose. And maybe that's true a little bit. But most of the time, our anger is a symptom of the fact that we have false ego. So then we could say, well, how is it that Krishna has this Rudra ego? Of course, everything we have originally comes from Krishna, but Krishna's anger is on a different level. Just like yesterday, we were talking about Krishna's sadness, where Jagannath is saying, I'm always crying in separation from Vrindavan. And the sadness is a rasa, karuna rasa. So also this anger is also a rasa, right? And in this world, we often try to enjoy anger. I was also hearing Prabhupada talk about this morning, how everything we do is motivated by rasa. So we often try to enjoy anger. It's one of the primary reasons that people go to sporting events. So they can enjoy chivalry and anger. Yes? One time I was visiting someone and their son, I forget how old he was, probably 18, 19. He's watching some sporting event on television and there's no one else in the room. Like I just walk through the room and I see him jump up and yell at the television. Why are you doing that? This is why people go to political rallies. Please don't think that people care that much about this politician or that politician or their various policies. But it's an excuse. Oh, I can enjoy anger. So there is some rasa in anger. And Krishna's anger rasa, unlike our anger in this world, is all loving. We have a little idea of this, right? If your child picks up something dangerous and you go, stop that! Put that down. So Krishna's anger is like that. We actually, just recently in Vrindavan, we were speaking on a verse about Balaram's anger and how Balaram got angry at Dvivida, who was actually his devotee but had become very degraded. And Srila Prabhupada often comments that the Lord's blessing and the Lord's anger act the same. That if Krishna gets angry at someone, that's actually his great blessing. It's his great benediction on them. It's all loving. So his ego is an ego of love, although it also tastes these various things such as anger. This is a very nice one to meditate on, very easy to meditate on. It would be very unusual that a day goes by when we don't have some contact with birds. And birds show the Lord's artistry. So how do birds show the Lord's artistry?
Different colors.
Their colors, what else?
Sound.
Their songs, even the ones that go caw, caw, they kind of sound like the drums in the symphony. What else?
The way they move.
The way they move, right? If you see them, there's some birds called, I think, starlings that fly in a group called murmurings. If you've ever seen that, it's really amazing. But even the ones that don't fly, even like the penguins. And what about the way that some of them build their nests? Some of them build their nests like great architects. So their forms, their colors, their movements, their songs, their architecture, all of these are indicative that the Lord is a great artist. So humanity is his residence. And Prabhupada often talks about the fact that only humans worship the Lord. So in human society, we have churches, temples, mosques, synagogues, and these places are called a house of God. And so this is where, of course, Krishna lives everywhere, but especially he lives there in humanity. And the angels show his musical rhythm. So in every culture, the angels are always shown as musicians. Have you noticed that? And they're indicative of the Lord's musical rhythm. And this is a weird one. That the demon soldiers represent his prowess. Prowess means skilled strength. So right now I'm studying for classes I'm going to teach on the 7th canto, and I'm almost at the point of the appearance of the Singhavik. So what question did Hiranyakashipu ask Prahlad about strength and prowess?
You get your power from.
Where do you get your power from? Where do you get your superhuman power from, Prahlad? And what did Prahlad say?
Same place you get yours.
In the same place you do, Father, from Krishna. So even the demons, they're so proud of their power. The demons are thinking, we're going to win our battles by our own strength. By our own physical power, by our own military power. Such fools, they don't know that their power is actually God's power. His thighs are the Vaishyas, so our thighs have the strongest bone in our body, our femur. Similarly, the Vaishyas, they're holding up and giving structure to all of society by providing all the raw materials. The Shudras are particularly under the protection of his feet. Prabhupada writes a wonderful purport about how that the Shudras are the only ones who really have a service attitude. We were talking about this with career dharma. This mood of wanting to please the customer and the client that really is absent in the other varnas. And Prabhupada talks about how we should all learn something of this service attitude in relationship to Krishna. And Krishna is so pleased with this service attitude that he especially gives those in this varna the protection of his lotus feet. Prabhupada also talks about, and I mentioned this the other day, how when we offer flowers to the Lord, we don't put them on his head, but we offer them to his feet. And similarly, we should see those who do this kind of work in the world, providing the functionality, the support, the beauty, the pleasures of the Lord, that we should respect them as having their place on the lotus feet of the Lord. So in the Lord's navel is the sky. This is something I also like to meditate on. Of course, it's very nice prayer in the Bhagavatam, how the Lord's navel is so... Well, you can hear me there, but you can't see anything. Why don't you come in so you can see? Or at least put the chair where you can see. So the Lord's navel is so deep that it looks like the whole universe has come out of it and again wants to go back. And that's the wonderful description in the Bhagavatam. The upper planetary systems are on his chest. On his eyebrows are the regulated principles, the vriddhis. So when we're doing the right thing, Krishna's doing this. When we're doing the wrong thing, he's doing this. And anger is in his forehead. You know, sometimes when we get angry, our forehead gets kind of like wrinkled, right? It's like, I think when we're angry, it's like we're stuck in one of these wrinkles on the Lord's forehead. And we're there with him, but we can't really see him. And his shadow is death. We can say, how does Krishna have any shadow? He's all effulgent. But when we turn from him, we are in shadow, and we experience death. And his smile is the illusory energy. So both Mahamaya and Yogamaya is this enchanting smile. And all living entities are throughout his body, as we said, Prabhupada says, where each is cell in the universal body. So we've quoted here from Cantos 2 and 8. There's actually also a similar description here in Canto 10 in Akura's prayers. And there's another place in Canto 10 also. So there's a number of other places where a similar description is given, at least 2 places in the 10th Canto. So I'd like to ask you now, what did you choose to meditate on? So if somebody could mention what they picked from here that they're going to meditate on. Yes?
On his feet.
On his feet. Feet what? Protecting us from fear, or the sutras on his feet?
Yes.
Protection from fear. The Lord's feet giving protection from fear. Excellent. Someone else? Yes.
Mountains are the sacred bones.
Mountains are his bones. Something easy to meditate on every day here, isn't it? Not going to go a day without seeing the mountains. Someone else? Yes.
Krishna's teeth and smile with his fiber.
His affection.
Yes.
Yes, his smile is his affection. Somebody else?
I'd like to meditate on the birds.
The birds, as showing that Krishna is an artist. Very nice. Someone else?
Meditate on the living entities.
All the living entities is part of the Lord's body. Okay, someone else?
The trees.
The trees is his hairs. And one can meditate on that 2 ways, both that I'm walking on the body of God, and how beautiful each of the pieces of vegetation are, and how beautiful each hair on the Lord's body is. Somebody else? Yes.
Eyeballs are the power of seeing.
His eyeballs are the sun as the power of seeing. That's something, again, that Srila Prabhupada talks about a lot. Someone else? Yes?
Krishna's nails.
Which one of the things of Krishna's nails?
The ruby ones.
Oh, all the jewels on Krishna's nails. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, somebody else. Yeah?
His words are the Vedic mantra.
Words of the Vedic mantras. When we're hearing the Vedic mantras, we're actually hearing the voice of the Lord. Somebody else?
Yeah, it's his breath.
The air is his breath. Just to stop for a moment and become aware of our breathing. We're actually breathing in the breath of the Lord. Full of his life, full of his prana, full of his energy. Anyone else?
Oceans on his waist.
The oceans are his waist, with his dancing movements. So tomorrow, Krishna willing, we'll be doing a little longer presentation. Tomorrow we'll be doing the I am verses from the Bhagavad Gita. You know, I'm the light of the sun, I'm the taste of water. We're meditating on those from the 7th, 9th, 10th, and 15th chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. So I'm sorry that we didn't have enough books for everybody. They are available on Amazon as print and Kindle. There is a paperback and hardback and Kindle books, so in 3 formats. And we are working on an audiobook. So the audiobook is in progress. Again, thank you very much. Any mistakes here are my own. Anything good here is from my co-author, Kamalasita, a beloved local daughter. And we really had fun, she and I together producing this book. I hope you really enjoy it. And of course, anything good here is from Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas, and the Shastra itself, and not from me. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.